We will reconvene the Ethics Committee hearing, and I would just like to make a couple comments. First of all, mainly on this side of the room, there's some, I don't know if it, mild heckling or comments. That is not necessary. I'll ask the sergeants to remove anybody that participates in that. Also, we are to go through the chairman of the committee to be recognized before anyone speaks. Okay, with that being said, Mr. Hudson, Representative Hudson, if you would join us, please. And sir, you have 30 minutes to make your presentation.
Chair Davids, Chair Moeller, members of the committee. While I find the contents of the complaint filed against me utterly absurd in its premise, absurd in its speculation, and most importantly, absurd in its presented evidence, I am nonetheless grateful for this opportunity to demonstrate in detail just how frivolous and politically motivated this complaint is. The complaint filed against Representative Engen and I rests on two remarkable premises. It implies that there are two enforceable norms for members of the Minnesota House of Representatives. One, perfect attendance at every moment of every portion of every piece of legislative business. Every committee hearing, every floor session, every official proceeding of that business. It's apparently meant to be attended by every member for every second between convening and adjournment. The second implied norm is that no member should consume alcohol during the legislative day. Both of these standards, if they actually exist, will come as a huge surprise to members, lobbyists, legislative staff, and anybody with any proximity whatsoever to how the House actually operates and the conduct routinely displayed and even officially encouraged. The latter half of the complaint bizarrely rests on no premise whatsoever. It merely documents the complainant's wholly unevidenced speculation, asking whether I was carrying a firearm on the House floor, despite no indication I was, and then imagining that my blood alcohol content exceeded the legal limit of 0.04. There is zero evidence to support either of those speculations. In fact, the very blood alcohol chart the complainants submitted actually undercuts their speculation. But before we get into all that, I believe it's important to ground ourselves in the history and purpose of this institution and this ethics committee in particular. The nonpartisan House research memo available online entitled Ethical Issues in the Minnesota House makes it clear that the Ethics Committee exists to address conduct that genuinely violates rules, accepted norms, the public trust, or brings the House into dishonor or disrepute. It emphasizes common sense, proportionality, and a ladder of response that begins with private interventions for most behavioral issues, because many issues do not rise to the level of ethical misconduct. And as was noted by Chair Davids at the outset of these proceedings, it's extremely rare to have these types of hearings. Excluding the 2021 John Thompson matter, which was resolved quickly with a public apology and dismissal, the last time this committee held hearings that led to formal discipline was, well, quite some time ago. I believe you said there's been 5 since the change of the century. So according to the complainants, therefore, and evidenced by the fact that they saw fit to conceive of, draft, and then actually file the complaint before you today, one of the most consequential ethical developments in the Minnesota House of Representatives in the past quarter century is that 2 legislators went to lunch and had a beer after cutting short an informational committee hearing. Let me put that into perspective. Since 1996, the House has seen multiple sitting members, including current committee chairs, plead guilty to DWI offenses while in office. Representative Dan Wogamont, who was famously seen on surveillance footage outside a liquor store taking chugs out of a freshly purchased liquor bottle before getting arrested down the road. Representative Byron Curran, who slammed into a median and was so intoxicated that she couldn't properly identify what city she was in. And Senator Tao Zhang, then serving in the House, with 2 separate DWI convictions. None of these incidents triggered ethics complaints or hearings. Representative Tony Cornish faced multiple accusations of sexual harassment from lobbyists and fellow members, leading to his resignation, but no ethics hearing. Representative Jim Rosberg was charged with felony criminal sexual conduct involving a juvenile. I'll say that again. Charged with felony criminal sexual conduct involving a juvenile. The Ethics Committee at that time deferred action, and the matter never proceeded to a hearing. Representative Arlen Linder made repeated inflammatory floor remarks that many found deeply offensive. Ethics complaints were filed, public proceedings were held, but no discipline was imposed. By the complainant's logic, 2 Republicans having lunch after an informational committee hearing was apparently more serious and worthy of this committee's time than any of those incidents. Now let's turn to the actual facts of March 26th. The Education Finance Committee held an informational hearing only. All 4 bills were laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. No votes were taken. Representative Engen and I each actively participated on the record. Contrary to the demonstrably incorrect claim in the complaint, I remained through the presentation of the final bill, House File 3585, and participated in member discussion on it. There was no further legislative procedure requiring my presence when I stepped out to thread a lunch in between the committee and a scheduled floor session 1 hour later. The baseball game, visible on the televisions in the Basham photo, matches the live broadcast at approximately 2:48 p.m. This was mere minutes before the committee adjourned. There is simply no consistently and uniformly enforced House rule or administrative policy that required us to remain in the committee until adjournment. And as everyone with any proximity to the legislature well knows, members leaving hearings or floor session for a wide variety of reasons, both official and personal, is extremely commonplace. The sole evidence offered is a photograph taken by former House Public Information Services staffer Brian Basham. As a longtime insider, he knows legislative schedules are not a typical 9-to-5 office job. Yet in his inflammatory social media post, he deliberately framed 2 members taking a lunch break as though we were slacking off from our jobs. He also claimed this was a chance encounter. He just happened to be picking up an order for his food delivery gig. That's convenient. It's also fairly bizarre and raises questions as to why someone who had been earning somewhere between $60 to $70K a year at the House, with some of the most extravagant benefits available in the state, would be reduced to DoorDash or whatever gig he claims he was engaged in. It's also bizarre that, judged by the angle the photo was taken from and the content of a social media post, he was apparently lingering in the bar area long enough to observe sequential drink orders and monitor our interaction. It's also awfully convenient that the DFL caucus immediately used that photo in their social media and brought it here as an exhibit. I'm sure it had no connection whatsoever with Basham's affinity for the Democrat Party, well documented by him on his own social media accounts. At face value, this does not appear to be neutral evidence. It looks a lot more like partisan opposition research. But strangely, the media never stopped to question it for a second. Just copy and paste. And I hate to bring it up because it truly is embarrassing in this context, but you chose to go forward with this, so I don't have a choice but to point it out. If there truly existed an absolute duty of perfect attendance at every moment of official activity, then one must ask, what ethical standard applied to Representative Engen and I taking a lunch break that did not apply to the entire House Democrat caucus when they boycotted the legislative session for 3 full weeks at the beginning of this term? The impact was significantly greater. They denied a quorum, paralyzed the House, and collected more than $130,000 in taxpayers' salaries while doing so. I guess the important people's work is only so important if Democrats hold power. The idea that having a beer during the legislative day violates accepted norms is further contradicted by the House's own practices. Earlier this season, or this session, Sweeney's Saloon publicly offered free po' boy sandwiches and a beer to any bipartisan group of legislators who dined together. Democrat Representative Ethan Cha announced the promotion on the House floor and distributed flyers to members of both caucuses. No controversy. Multiple members posted photos of themselves on their own social media accounts, some with tall beers visible right in the middle of the photo. And judging by the lighting, their attire, and the times of the posts, these bipartisan shared drinks occurred right in the middle of legislative days. That's strange, isn't it? I mean, if there's this enforced expectation that members never drink during the day during legislative business, why would so many members eagerly document violations of that norm on their own social media accounts? But that's not all. As anyone who operates around here well knows, there are routine happy hours, dinners, and receptions that occur throughout and around the legislative session at all hours of the day, including the recent Minnesota Legislative Society happy hour at Mancini's just this past Tuesday, which went from 4 to 6 p.m., right before a scheduled House floor session at 6, and before the State of the State address. Then there's the upcoming I-90 party that openly distributes free alcohol to members, lobbyists, and legislative staff. Events like this are routinely announced without shame on the House floor. They're celebrated as bipartisan events that everyone looks forward to throughout the session. They've been written about at length in the mainstream media with no apparent concern for any shocking breach of decorum rules or ethics or norms. Finally, let me address the laughable speculation in the latter half of the complaint. It's telling that the concerns are asserted as questions rather than factual claims, which inherently means that the complainants have no idea what they're talking about and no evidence to support it. First and foremost, there is no indication that I was carrying a firearm on the House floor, and I have no obligation to disclose whether I was. But even if we were to take my carrying for granted, the complainant's own evidence, the blood alcohol chart, proves that I couldn't possibly have been legally impaired. 2 drinks for a man of 6'4" and 250 pounds can't get you to 0.04. And my blood alcohol content would have diminished to negligible amounts by the time I was back on the House floor. And of course, both Representative Engen and I coherently participated in floor discussion over the course of the next 6 hours, multiple times each. The nonpartisan memo calls for common sense and proportionality. Our conduct on March 26 does not meet the threshold of Rule 6.10. Chair and members, I ask that you find no probable cause and dismiss this frivolous complaint. It does not allege and cannot establish any violation of House rule or accepted norm that has been consistently and uniformly enforced. I'm prepared to answer questions relevant to the content of this complaint, but will not be participating in any contrived fishing expedition to uncover evidence that the complainants did not have before drafting and filing their complaint. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Representative Hudson. We'll now go to member questions. Member questions, we'll start with the co-chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you too, obviously, for being here today. You know, the beginning, you talked about 2 norms regarding perfect attendance that would be set with this, or that a member shouldn't consume alcohol during the day. But I just want to be very clear, the way I understand the complaint is not about either of those 2 norms. It's about the fact that committee hearing was happening, that you were in a committee, you left the committee, and then you went to the bar to watch a game, drink a beer. And so I guess my question for you is, are you acknowledging, excuse me, are you acknowledging that you did leave committee before it was over?
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, with due respect, Madam Chair, this committee exists for the purpose of enforcing norms. So the question of whether the 2 premises underlying the complaint are accurate depictions of consistently and uniformly enforced norms in this body is very, very relevant. Am I admitting that I left committee, went to an establishment, had lunch, and that there were 2 drink orders on my part? Yes. My contention is not that those things did not happen. My contention is that those things are not violations of consistently and uniformly enforced norms in this body.
Chair Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to be clear, you left during House File 3930's presentation, and then you didn't return for that bill, and then you were gone for House File 3585 and all of those witnesses as well.
Representative Hudson.
Are you asking me to affirm that account?
Yes.
I don't recall the exact time when I left the committee, and I don't find it relevant to the underlying establishment of whether or not I broke norms of this House.
Chair Moeller.
Well, that's the underlying issue with the complaint. So the evidence submitted suggests that you left during 3930, you didn't return, and you were gone for House File 3585. And that at that time, then you were not present either at that committee and were seen at Sweeney's. Sorry, you mentioned Sweeney's, at Burger Mo's. You did mention Sweeney's Salon and the free lunch offer and the beers that people were drinking at that. Do you have any evidence that those members that partook in that Sweeney's situation left during committee to go have beer?
Representative Hudson.
No, I do not have evidence that they left a committee in order to do that, but that is not an integral component to my argument that neither leaving committee or engaging in the consumption of alcohol during the legislative day violate the norms of this body.
Chair Moeller.
None for now. Thank you.
Representative Myers.
Thank you, Chair Davids. Similar questions that I had before, Representative Hudson. How long have you served in the legislature?
Hudson.
I was elected in 2022, took the oath of office in 2023, and I'm serving my 2nd term.
Representative Myers.
Thank you, Chair Davids. And from that time that you've served, have you seen it as common practice for members to leave committee?
Representative Hudson.
It's most certainly common for members to leave both committee and the House floor on a routine basis. In fact, some of you may recall there was an article that was written by Minnesota Reformer reporter Michelle Griffith highlighting the prevalence of people not being present on the House floor. There was a photo attached to that article that showed, I believe it was Chair Pinto, and I don't remember the other representative, going up and down the rows, pushing everybody's button. As you know, we're allowed, under the normal course of business when there's not a call of the House, to push each other's buttons and vote for each other. And the narrative of the article was highlighting that this is something that happens. One of the things that I noted was that they didn't really ask the question or explore the question, why does it happen? Why does it happen? Why do people feel as though it's not important for them to be sitting in their seats listening to somebody debate? Which is a question that was very heavily leaned upon by your Democrat colleagues on this committee while they were interrogating Representative Engen. Well, isn't it so vitally important that we sit attentively, full-backed, eye contact, paying rapt attention to every word that is said by any member who's in debate or any testifier who's offering their testimony? If that's true, if that's the expectation, how did the reformer come up with the basis to write that article? And I'll give you the reason. It's not a particularly controversial reason in terms of the conduct of the members. It should be a controversial reason in terms of the structure of this institution. The reason why people are so eager to leave the House floor is because none of it matters. Everybody knows how they're going to vote. It's all been caucused. It's all been pre-programmed. Nobody's going to be convinced by anything that anyone is saying, and we all know it. That is the reason for the continual absence of members from official proceedings. And what they do when they're gone is anybody's business, anybody's guess, but nobody's business. Sometimes it's going to the bathroom. Sometimes it's getting a bite to eat. Sometimes it's taking a phone call. That's why we have a speaker pro tem, and that's why it's very rare to find a chair on the House floor at any given time, particularly this time of the session.
Representative Myers.
Thank you, Chair Davids. To follow up a little bit on that, from when you were up and not in committee, is it accurate to say those two bills were either laid over or heard informationally?
Representative Hudson.
That is 100% accurate.
Representative Myers.
Thank you, Chair. And then the final question I have is, outside committee work, what other duties are you performing as a legislator?
Representative Hudson.
Well, I take a lot upon myself that I'm not assigned. This is a job that pretty much is what you put into it and is what you make of it. So a lot of the stuff that I do is community engagement, going to events, traveling the state, talking to people, with a particular emphasis on talking to folks who are not currently politically aligned with my side of the aisle in an attempt to try to develop a relationship and come to a better understanding of their experience so that I can better represent them down here.
Representative Myers. Chair Claiborne. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back to Chair Mueller. Then we'll go to Chair Claiborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just following up on the question about your comment about the House floor and how sometimes members are gone from the House floor. Do you know if those members left the House floor to go to a bar and watch a ball game and drink?
Representative Hudson.
Well, listen, Chair Mueller, perhaps if the process of this proceeding was more in line with typical due process, then I would have had the opportunity to present witnesses who could testify to the number of vodka shooters that they found in the women's restroom off of the retiring room. Unfortunately, I wasn't given that opportunity because you set the last meeting at 4 o'clock on Tuesday to adopt procedures that to that point had not been publicly available and were not presented to me. And then I had until 10 a.m. the following day, less than 24 hours, to anticipate what evidence would be brought against me and submit evidence of my own. In other words, no ability to actually respond to evidence submitted against me. And so perhaps I could have anticipated the relevance of your question and provided that and plenty more evidence that would not be particularly helpful to the direction you're going. Unfortunately, I wasn't given that opportunity.
Chair Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you did, just for the record, there was an email sent by the committee administrator on Friday night. We're trying to find the time because we did want to give you extra time in the weekend because we knew we weren't going to be coming to that first committee. So you were given advance notice. The other people for whom complaints were filed did present evidence. And so if you had asked for any sort of grace to bring some today or allow more time, you could have asked for that and you did not. It was sent at 3:39 on Friday, the 24th.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond to that. What was sent on Friday was an indication of when the hearing would be. And that what may have been included in that email, but most certainly was part of the proceedings here on Tuesday, was the fact that both the accusers and the respondents were going to have the same deadline for submitting evidence. I'm not quite sure how somebody who's responding to an accusation can submit evidence on the same timeline of the people who are accusing him when you don't know what it is that they're bringing to bear.
Chair Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, you could have asked for any kind of clarification. We did what we did based on past ethics hearings. And the answer was the complaint itself and the evidence submitted, you could have presented any evidence to respond to the things that you received in writing. So I would like to get back to the issue at hand here. Did you receive permission from either of the chairs of the Education Finance Committee to be excused?
Representative Hudson.
No.
Chair Mueller.
And are you aware of any rules that say it is okay to leave committee because a bill is going to be laid over and not voted on?
Representative Hudson.
Our rules are not structured in that fashion. They do not tell us what we're allowed to do.
Chair Mueller. Chair Claiborne.
Thank you, Chair Davids, and I'll try to be very good about going through the chair. So,
I wasn't referring to you.
okay. Representative Hudson, could you please tell me, how did you get back to the Capitol from Bergamos?
Representative Hudson.
I do not recall.
Chair Claiborne.
You have no idea how you got from Burger Mo's to the Capitol? Is that what you just said to me?
Representative Hudson.
In a context where we are here 4 or 5 days a week and we make multiple trips through multiple methods, sometimes through rideshare, sometimes riding with someone else, sometimes driving ourselves, you are asking me to remember the specific transportation mode that I utilized over a month ago. I think it's reasonable to say, I'm not sure.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you. I find that hard to believe, given the events of that day and the fact that you were able to tell us what you had to drink that day and what you consumed that day. I would think, knowing how you got, it's a car ride of 7 minutes, to have some idea of how you got there. I find that hard to believe.
Well, I can give you options. It was one of two things. It was either I drove myself or I rode along with Representative Engen, or the other way around.
Chair Claiborne.
So, Mr. Chair, are you saying that one of you had a car?
Yes.
Okay.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you very
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you very much. Can you please tell me, Representative Engen referenced a third person at the table. Do you recall who that third person was? Was it a friend, a colleague, a lobbyist?
Representative Hudson.
I don't remember specifically who it was, but it was definitely someone who works in the Capitol space who happened to be there coincidentally and stopped to speak with us for a few minutes.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you. Was it the same individual who was with you later in the day?
Representative Hudson.
I'm going to, out of grace, I'm going to answer this question, but this is the last time I will be making any reference to events that are outside the scope of this complaint. No, it was not.
Thank you.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you. Representative Hudson, do you believe that the public expects us to go drink in the middle of a committee hearing?
Representative Hudson.
My beliefs are not relevant to the business of this committee. I didn't receive an ethics complaint alleging that I have inappropriate beliefs. I received an ethics complaint alleging that I violated the established norms of this House. The way we know they're established is that they're consistently and uniformly enforced. My contention is that the conduct of myself and Representative Engen on March 26th in relation to official business was not a violation of the established norms that are consistently and uniformly enforced in this House.
Chair Claiborne.
Representative Hudson, do you believe that the public trusts us to come to committee meetings when we are assigned to be in committee?
Representative Hudson.
Once again, perhaps taking a little more time this time, I will point out that my beliefs are not on trial here. My beliefs are not relevant to this proceeding. The question is whether or not facts have been evidenced to establish probable cause of violating the established norms and rules of this House.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you. The question before the body today is, have the actions you've taken betrayed the public trust? I did not ask you what your beliefs were. I asked you if your behavior defied the public's trust in us to attend committee meetings when we are assigned time to be in committee.
Representative Hudson.
Contrary to how you just restructured the question, you did in fact inquire as to what my belief was. That said, in reference to the second way you framed it, again, this is not an issue of whether or not I believe or what I might anticipate about what other people believe. It is about whether, in fact, according to the norms of this House, which are established by the consistently and uniformly enforced standards of behavior that are seen by members on the daily, whether or not what I specifically did on that date violates those norms. If you're going to make the case that it does, boy, oh boy. If you're going to make the case that the public trust is violated whenever a member of the legislature isn't at the legislature, get ready for a lot more of these, because they're coming.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you. Representative Hudson, you understand at this time of the year, there are a lot of negotiations that occur between the House and the Senate. And is it a factual statement that sometimes people are absent from the floor because they are in conference committee or they are negotiating a deal between the House and the Senate to get bills across the finish line?
Rep. Hudson.
Yeah, that's true. That does happen.
Thank you.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And do you think that the public expects legislators to listen to opposing views in this body?
Representative Hudson.
I would agree with the statement that a lot of the public proceeds under the misconception that that's what we're doing here. As I've established, it's not.
Chair Claiborne.
Mr. Chair, I would ask that the testifier not impugn the motives of other people. Just because the testifier may or may not participate fully in committees does not mean that all members are not doing this. So because that is not my norm, I just want to state that. Can you please tell me, Representative Hudson, what time you arrived at Burger Mo's?
Representative Hudson.
I did not take the time to glance at a clock whenever it was that I arrived. But I want to address what you just said, implying that I was expressing my singular attitude as opposed to reflecting the very evident structure of how this institution works. Again, as I pointed out, it has been broadly observed and written about in the mainstream media that there is broad. You mean to tell me 2 rows of legislators are off doing official business related to end of session negotiations? I don't think so. You want to tell me when half the floor is empty or more on the routine that everybody's out there hammering away negotiating? I don't think so. You want to tell me that we don't know, that we don't caucus? What are we doing in the caucus room? We don't know how people are going to vote? We don't have whips? What are they whipping, if not votes? My point is the fact that we have a 24-hour amendment rule that prohibits legislators from walking across the aisle and saying, you know what, you just made a good point. Maybe we should submit an amendment that actually changes this and makes it better. The way this institution is structured incentivizes disengagement. That's my point.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have referenced that you had 2 drinks. Did you have any food?
Representative Hudson.
Yeah, I had a bowl of soup.
Okay, thank you very
Claiborne.
much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Moeller. Oh, I'm sorry. Chair Claiborne.
Thank you. This goes back to what the public may or may not expect of us. So do you, in your opinion, I'll ask it that way, in your opinion, do you believe the public wants a legislator to leave committee to go and watch a ball game in the middle of the day and consume alcohol? And that's a yes or no answer.
Rep. Hudson.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were wasting time
No, Rep.
because I heard the same question for the 3rd time, so I thought I'd participate in the trajectory of the discourse. I'm not going to give you my answer for a 3rd time.
Chair Claiborne.
Was that a refusal to answer? I just want to make sure I have,
Rep. Claiborne, he's answered 3 times.
no, I didn't ask about a ball game earlier.
Oh, no.
Oh, there's a ball game element
I
now
asked
too.
about watching-
Okay,
it
so
was-
now that the ball game's part of it,
It was the Twins opener that was referenced.
Representative Hudson.
sure. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to have to take some time to think about this now that you've introduced the crucial element of the ball game in this. I think what this evidence is quite clearly is the frivolousness and the complete lack of seriousness that undergirds this entire complaint. I am now taking questions about what I had to eat and what was on the TV in reference to public trust and established norms and the rules of this institution. I go back to what I said at the end of my presentation. This must be found without probable cause and dismissed. It is perhaps, I'll have to go back and check, perhaps one of the silliest complaints, certainly in reference to other documented member behavior that this committee has ever been burdened with.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will just ask this last question. Because the public does pay us to come here and to do our work, and the public does pay us per diem to pay for our food and drink while we are at the Capitol, I would like to know, did you take per diem for the day that you left committee early and drank and watched the ball game?
Representative Hudson.
I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to tell you exactly why. It's coming from one of 67 members of this body that refused to show up to work for nearly a month and got paid for it. To try to bring per diem, another petty concern, into this conversation in that context, and I already warned you this was coming. I already mentioned it, that you have no leg to stand on here with this attendance standard, and yet you go back to it again. Odd choice. Thanks for the last question.
Okay, Chair Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just because of what was the claims that were made about due process, I would like to read the email into the record that was sent on April 24th, 2026 at 3:40 to Representative Hudson from the committee administrator, with your permission, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
I'm sending this, Representative Hudson, I'm sending this email on behalf of Chair Davids and Chair Moeller. We are writing to inform you that the House Ethics Committee is scheduled to meet on Tuesday, April 28th at 4 p.m. to adopt ethics procedures. A public notice will be posted today. Your presence is not necessary at this hearing. Although the procedure has not been adopted yet, you may find it helpful to review the attached document from Nonpartisan Research, see appendix starting on page 10. At the hearing, we will also inform the parties and public about the probable cause hearing that will be held on Friday, May 1st at 10 a.m. The Ethics Committee will hear arguments from complainants and respondents for all 3 ethics complaints. A formal agenda for the May 1st hearing will be emailed to the representatives and any council early next week. Please provide the contact information for any counsel you may have to the committee administrators, Ellen McDaniel and Casey Peterson, as soon as possible. The committee is asking that the parties submit evidence, briefs, or other relevant documents for consideration by 10 a.m. Wednesday, April 29th. Please reach out to both Casey and Ellen if there are any questions regarding the hearings. This information will also be shared with the complainants. Signed by your 2 co-chairs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Moeller. Representative Myers.
Thank you, Chair David. Just 2 follow-up questions, Rep. Hudson. Is it common practice for legislators to leave Capitol grounds to do things like prepare for floor sessions, future bill presentations, and other duties that they have as a role as a legislator?
Representative Hudson.
Before I answer that question, I just want to thank Chair Moeller for reading that email into the record and clearly demonstrating the points that I earlier made. The attachment to that email was the document that I did reference in my presentation. It was not the procedures, and it reiterates the fact that the deadline for evidence submission was the same for both the complainants and the respondents. But to your question, of course it's routine for legislators to be anywhere and everywhere in the conduct of doing their job. Again, as everyone who has any association with this body knows, with this building knows, we talk about this as work. We sometimes refer to it in shorthand as a job. None of us with election certificates at the Minnesota House of Representatives has a job. We hold an office. That office does not close. It does not have posted hours. We are holding that office when we're out with our constituents, when we're having a meeting with a member of the public, when we're talking to a lobbyist or another legislator. And those types of encounters occur anywhere and everywhere. They are not confined either by rule or accepted norm to these House grounds.
Representative Myers.
That's it.
Any other questions from Chair Claiborne or Chair Moeller? Okay. So with that, we have our member questions. We will go into recess. We will report back to this room at 1 p.m. Any questions from members or staff? Okay, all right, I gotta say recess, not adjournment. We are in recess till 1 o'clock p.m.